Red at a funeral, not an accident. Pews cold, shoes scrape. Whispers, hiss. Miss Marple sat still, eyes sharp, hands folded. Margaret, in front, jaw tight, face pale. Blackwood shifted, cologne, faint. Peyton's pen clicked, once, then, again, a sound from the back. Doors opened, heads turned. A woman stepped in, red dress, clear red, not muted. Heels tapped, steps, even. Eyes forward. She moved past the rows, past the stairs, stopped, at the front. Margaret stared at her, no blink, hands locked. The woman said, "Excuse me." Voice steady. The room went silent, no coughs, no shuffling. "I am his wife," she said. Gasps. From the side, a chair creaked, Margaret's head lifted. "How dare you?" The woman's eyes fixed on her. "Married, 1952, St. Michael's Church." Her bag opened, paper pulled out, edges worn, seal unbroken. She held it up, turned, so all could see. Blackwood leaned forward. Peyton frowned. James shifted in his seat. Miss Marple watched their faces, their hands, their pauses. The certificate caught the light. Names, clear, date, bold. Margaret's knuckles whitened, her lips pressed tight. The woman lowered the paper, slipped it back into her bag, closed, the clasp. "I won't fight here," she said, "but the truth won't stay buried." A murmur swept the room. Margaret didn't move. Blackwood stared ahead. James leaned closer to his mother, spoke in a whisper. She gave no reply. The woman turned, walked down the aisle, same pace, same rhythm. Eyes followed her. No one spoke. At the doors she stopped, pulled them open, stepped. Through. The sound of the latch carried back, then quiet. Whispers returned, low, at first, then faster. Miss Marple stayed seated, mind working. Why red? Why now? Why here? She glanced at Margaret, then at Blackwood, then at the sun. A puzzle had started, pieces scattered. But one fact stood. The woman in red had just called herself the wife. 2 marriages, 1 corpse. Miss Marple sat at the table. Registrar books, open. Ink smell, sharp. Peyton slid the first certificate forward, edges clean, paper firm. "Margaret Whitmore," he read. "Married Harold Whitmore. Date, May 1955. Marple touched the corner, felt the fibers, old but kept well. James stood near the wall, hands in pockets, eyes down. Blackwood stayed back. Arms folded, gaze fixed, on the floor. The second paper appeared. Peyton placed it flat, careful. "Victoria Whitmore," he read. "Married Harold Whitmore. Date, June, 1952. No one spoke. Marple ran her glove over the edge. Rougher paper, ink, lighter. The dates did not match. 3 years apart. 1 man, 2 marriages. Margaret's smile was small, tight. Her hands rested on the table. James glanced at her, then away. Quick movement. Blackwood shifted his weight, still not looking at anyone. Marple tapped the table once with her glove. A slow rhythm. Peyton's eyes followed the motion. Margaret leaned forward, said nothing. Just watched Marple's hand. Marple spoke quietly. 2 certificates, same husband. Overlap? Peyton nodded. Yes, dates overlap, travel records, train tickets, hotel stays, France, twice. Marple's head tilted slightly. Her eyes moved between the papers. James stepped closer. "What does that mean?" Peyton's gaze flicked to him. "It means your father was married to 2 women at the same time." James flinched. His mouth opened. No sound came. Margaret looked at Peyton, her voice even. "This is nonsense. The first one is false." Victoria's voice cut in from the doorway. "It is not false." All heads turned. Her red dress was gone. A dark coat now, her bag, still on her arm. She walked forward, placed her hand on the older paper. This one is mine, and it's real. Peyton cleared his throat. Both have proper seals. Both match handwriting on file. Blackwood spoke for the first time. This will destroy the estate. Margaret's jaw tightened further. James took a step back. Marple kept her eyes on Victoria's hands. No tremor, no hesitation. Peyton reached for the ledger, opened it. Travel records, hotel signatures, matches to the earlier date, and after. Marple leaned in, traced the lines with her finger. 2 trips, 3 weeks apart. Different woman. Each time. Margaret's voice broke the silence. This proves nothing about my position. Victoria's eyes flashed. It proves you were never the only wife. James's face turned pale. Blackwood exhaled through his nose. Marple looked at Peyton. His hand hovered over the next file. He didn't open it. Margaret stood. Her chair scraped. This is not the place. Victoria stood too. This is exactly the place. Peyton shut the ledger, his voice low. You'll want Inspector Slack. Now. Truth travels faster than the bell. The post office was busy. Low hum, voices, overlap. Miss Marple waited at the counter, watched hands pass coins, watched stamps pressed. A heavy stamp thudded, ink smudged. Clerk wiped it. Quick. Mrs. Green spoke in a low voice, to no one in particular. Funeral was a scene. Another woman leaned closer. Red dress. Imagine it. Miss Marple didn't comment. She let them talk. Teacups clinked in the back room. She caught the tannin taste in the air. Strong brew. The gossip mapped out the day. Who had gone where? What time? Harold's habits surfaced quick. Thursday, post, Friday, bank. Always the same time. Mrs. Green leaned on the counter. Victoria used to come with him. A man in the queue joined in. Margaret, too. Not together. Never together. Miss Marple noted the detail. Never together. Always. Separate. The clerk brought a tray forward. Letters stacked. One stood out. Cream paper, thicker. Tied with a thin red ribbon. She took her change, moved aside, watched the ribbon shift as the clerk handled it. Mrs. Green noticed, too. That one's been here. Since yesterday. The clerk shrugged. Picked up today. Mrs. Baker signed. Miss Marple asked, For whom? The clerk frowned. No name I recall. Came in with a hat low. The man in the queue coughed, said, Red lipstick. Saw it on her cup. In the cafe. Marple asked, Today? He nodded. This morning. She pictured the lipstick mark, curved, neat. The red ribbon caught her eye again. She moved closer to the counter. Another thud from the back room. More stamps pressed. Voices dropped. Lower. Mrs. Green whispered, Victoria had that same ribbon in her sewing box. Marple looked at her. When did you see it? Mrs. Green thought. A week ago, before all this. The clerk carried the tray to the side table. The ribboned letter sat on top. Tilted, slightly. Marple reached for her glove, adjusted it. As she moved, her finger brushed the edge of the ribbon. A single thread came loose. Thin, smooth. She pressed it into her palm, slipped it into her pocket. Mrs. Green's voice cut through again. They say Harold kept letters locked in his desk. The man in the queue nodded. And someone's been in that desk. Lately. Marple didn't answer. Her mind turned to the desk, to the letters, to the key. The clerk passed her a small parcel. She took it, kept her other hand in her pocket, fingers on the thread. The ribbon shifted again on the tray. A faint smell drifted, almond, sharp, bitter. She held her breath. The scent faded. The thread in her pocket felt heavier now. The ribbon smell, bitter almonds, ghosted the air. Keys cold, kettle louder than talk. Mrs. Baker locked the door. Key turned, slow, metal cold, in her hand. Her steps echoed in the hallway. Wood creaked under her weight. Victoria sat in the chair, coat draped over the armrest, hands around a cup. She coughed once, cleared her throat, coughed. Again. Steam fogged the window glass, dripped down, in lines. Mrs. Baker crossed the room, set the kettle back on the stove. The whistle faded. Victoria lifted the cup. Teacup rim touched her lip. She took a slow sip. Mrs. Baker glanced at the pillbox on the table. Lid open, small white tablets inside. Victoria pushed it shut with her finger. Click. Rain tapped against the slate roof, faster, then slower. Mrs. Baker poured herself a tea. No milk, no sugar. Victoria's eyes followed her, watched each movement. "You're locking up early," Victoria said. "Bad weather?" Mrs. Baker replied. She sipped. Another creak in the hallway. No one there. The sound faded. Victoria sat, her cup down, leaned back, coughed again. Mrs. Baker reached for a cloth, wiped the table edge. Victoria's hand went to the cup again, steam still rising. She drank. The pillbox clicked once more. Victoria placed it back in her bag. Mrs. Baker sat opposite her, hands folded. Now. "Did you go out today?" she asked. Victoria shook her head. "Not far. Post office." Mrs. Baker nodded. No further questions. The rain picked up again, drummed on the roof. Gutter rattled outside. Victoria glanced toward the window. Couldn't see much. Through the fogged glass. She shifted in her seat, pulled the coat tighter. Mrs. Baker's gaze moved to the clock. Tick. Steady. Victoria's cough came back. Short. This time. Mrs. Baker stood, picked up the kettle, filled another cup. She set it down in front of Victoria. "Drink while it's hot." Victoria smiled faintly, lifted the cup, sipped again. Steam drifted between them. The pillbox shifted in her bag. Another faint click. Mrs. Baker sat back down, hands in her lap. They didn't speak, only the rain, and the clock filled the room. Victoria's eyes grew heavier. She leaned back, into the chair. Mrs. Baker watched her closely. No words. The cup slid a little on the saucer. Porcelain. Scraped. Victoria's head tilted to the side, eyes half closed. A sound from upstairs. One step, then another. Mrs. Baker's eyes went to the ceiling, waited, a soft thud, then quiet. Too quiet. Smell first, then fear. The window latch was cold. Slack pushed it down. It clicked. Shut. Victoria sat slumped in the chair, head tilted, arms loose, at her sides. The air carried it. Bitter almonds. Faint. Slack stepped closer, kneeling. He leaned in, the smell. Stronger now. No doubt. He took out his notebook. Pencil scratched. Quick lines. Dr. Haydock entered, bag in hand, face set. He bent over Victoria, lifted one eyelid, then the other. Pupils fixed, no reaction. He touched her wrist. No pulse. Checked. Again. Slack asked, "Time?" Haydock glanced at the clock. "Within the hour." James stood near the doorway, hands gripping the frame, knuckles pale. Margaret stood beside him, face composed, eyes steady. Haydock reached into his bag, took out a small vial, held it near her mouth. No breath. Stirred it. He closed the vial, returned it to the bag. Slack wrote again. The pencil moved. Fast. Stopped. "Cyanide?" he asked. Haydock nodded once. "Smell tells enough." James stepped forward. "What happened to her?" Neither answered. Slack turned to him. "Where were you?" James looked at Margaret. She didn't speak. "I was upstairs," he said, "writing." Slack's eyes stayed on him, then moved back to the body. Haydock straightened. "She didn't suffer long." Margaret's voice was flat. "Then, it's done." Slack turned his head sharply. Done? She made her claims, Margaret said, and now she's gone. James shifted his weight, looked at the floor. Haydock packed his instruments, closed the bag. Slack walked around the chair, checked the floor. Nothing spilled. The cup sat on the table, half full, steam, gone. He lifted it, brought it to his nose. The smell was there. He set it down, looked toward her bag. It rested on the side table, strap loose. He opened it, slow, no sound. Inside, powder case. Folded handkerchief, pillbox. Beneath them, cloth pouch. He pulled it out, felt the shape, opened it. A small key lay inside, metal, dull. Around it, thin red thread, wrapped tight. Slack held it up, looked at Haydock, then at Margaret. No one spoke. The key turned once in his hand. The thread caught. The light. Victoria's bag held a key, wrapped in red thread. Stitching tells stories. The dress lay flat, on the table. Fabric, smooth, color, still sharp. Marple stood over it, hands gloved, eyes steady. Slack stepped closer. Ready? She nodded. Her fingers moved. Along the side seam, stopped. The stitching was tight, not factory work, hand done. She pressed, lightly. Something inside. Scissors rested on the edge of the table. She took them, snipped. The thread. The seam opened. A soft rustle came from within. She reached in, pulled out folded paper, edges, yellowed. Slack leaned over. What is it? Marple unfolded it. Photographs, black and white. One showed Harold, another, Victoria. The two, together. Margaret's name was written on the back of one, different ink. She set the photographs aside, reached in again, this time metal. Small, cold, a steel key, plain, no markings. Slack took it, turned it, in his fingers, then set it down. Marple's hand went back inside, pulled out. A small folded note, paper, thin. She opened it, words in block letters. Box, study, mantle. Slack read it twice. Clear enough, he said. Marple looked at the seam again. Her finger traced the repair. Neat work, done with care. Someone meant these to stay hidden, she said. Slack agreed, and they almost did. He picked up the key again, weighed it in his hand. Marple gathered the photographs and note, placed them in an envelope. Slack folded the dress, set it aside. They left the table, walked toward the study. The door was closed. Slack pushed it open. The mantel stood against the far wall, clock in the center, 2 candlesticks beside it. Below, small carved box, wood, dark, brass lock. Slack held the key, looked at Marple. She nodded. Once. He knelt, slid the key into the lock. It turned. Metal, clicked. The study box was there. The lock clicked. Paper cuts sharper, then knives. Slack lifted the lid. Inside, folded paper. Edges, crisp. He pulled it out, unfolded it. On the desk, a will, typed, dated, last year. Marple leaned over, eyes on the signature, ink, still dark. Peyton stood in the doorway, brows tight, hands clasped. This is newer, Slack said. Yes, Peyton replied. Much newer. Marple tapped the corner. Condition too clean, hardly touched. Slack set the will aside, reached back into the box. Ledger came next. Leather cover, worn at the edges. He opened it to the last pages. Numbers neat, columns aligned. Marple moved closer, ran her gloved finger down the right-hand side. Pennies off, she said, then pounds. Slack flipped back 3 pages. Same pattern, small errors, then larger ones. Peyton stepped forward, looked down, swallowed. These initials, BW, Slack read. Blackwood, Peyton said quietly. Slack closed the ledger halfway, looked at Marple. She gave me a small nod. He reopened it, checked older entries, clean, then a shift, ink darker, handwriting less precise. The smell, Marple noted. Fresh ink. Peyton's mouth tightened. He said nothing. Slack placed the ledger beside the will. The desk now held both. He returned to the box, ran his hand along the bottom. Something caught. Thin edge of more paper. He pulled gently. A second folded sheet emerged. Thicker stock, edges worn. Marple stepped in, her eyes fixed. On the fold. Slack opened it, slowly. Another will, handwritten. Date at the top, 4 years ago. Peyton moved closer. This predates the other by 3 years. Marple pointed at the names listed. Victoria's name included, clear, unaltered. Slack compared both documents. First will, Victoria removed. Second will, Victoria included. He looked at Peyton. 2 wills, one newer, one older. One erases her. Peyton said nothing. His gaze stayed on the papers. Marple glanced at the ledger again. The initials repeated near the largest sums. Slack folded the older will carefully, placed it back on the desk. Peyton adjusted his tie, cleared his throat. Marple kept her eyes on him, silent. The air between them stayed, heavy. No one moved. Slack reached for the box lid, rested it in place, did not close it. Yet. He looked at both wills again, side by side. The second will lay flat, dated, to erase Victoria, one spouse, double payout. The file lay open, pages flat, paper dry. Peyton adjusted his glasses. Insurance terms, he said. Slack leaned in, read the header, life policy. Peyton tapped the first paragraph. Standard coverage, 100,000. Marple kept her eyes on the page. Peyton's finger moved lower. Clause here, he said. Double indemnity if death is accidental, but only to a legal spouse. Margaret sat at the table. Her ring tapped once, then twice. Slack wrote in his notebook. Pencil lead snapped. He set it down. Peyton continued. Beneficiary must be verified. No dispute. No second claimant. Marple asked. And if there is? Funds held, Peyton replied, until settled, in court, if necessary. Margaret's voice was even. Then there is nothing to discuss. Slack looked at her. You think so? She didn't answer, tapped the ring again. Marple turned a page. Another clause, in bold. Peyton read aloud. Claim must be filed within 30 days of death. Proof required. Slack asked, proof meaning certificate? Yes, Peyton said, and confirmation from the registry. Only one record accepted. Marple said quietly, that record is in dispute. Peyton didn't reply. His eyes dropped to the desk. Slack leaned back. So, motive doubles. Peyton looked up. More than doubles. 200,000. Tax-free. Margaret's eyes didn't move. Her ring tapped again. Marple closed the file, rested her hand on it. Peyton cleared his throat. I should mention, once the claim is processed, reversal is near impossible, Slack said, so timing matters. Very much so, Peyton replied. Marple glanced at the clock. How long since death? 4 days, Peyton said. Slack picked up his broken pencil, snapped the other end, dropped it on the table. Margaret's gaze flicked to him, then away. Peyton folded his hands. There is one more detail. Slack waited. Marple waited. Peyton's eyes moved between them. Someone filed for the claim this morning. Good brandy, bad timing. The office lamp buzzed. Light flickered once, then held. Blackwood stood by the cabinet, took out a cut-glass decanter, set it on the desk, 2 glasses beside it, one larger, one small. He pulled the stopper, poured slow. Amber liquid swirled. The clink was sharp. Glass on glass. Slack sat opposite, notebook closed, hands still. Long day, Blackwood said. He raised the larger glass, drank deep. Marple stood near the door, eyes on the stove in the corner. Papers burned there. The smell reached her, dry ink, scorched edges. She noted each sheet curling, falling in on itself. Blackwood lowered his glass, set it down, breath. Heavy. Slack asked, "Clearing records?" "Tidying," Blackwood said. His hand waved at the stove. Marple moved closer, glanced at the flames, numbers visible for a moment, ledger entries, initials. BW. Blackwood poured again, hand, less steady. Slack's eyes stayed on him, didn't touch his own glass. Blackwood drank, shorter swallow, coughed once. Marple turned her head, watched his collar dampen, sweat along the edge. He shifted in his chair, cleared his throat, coughed again. Slack asked, "You all right?" Blackwood didn't answer. His breathing quickened. He reached for the desk, knocked the glass sideways. Liquid spread across the papers, darkened the ink. He pushed himself up, then stopped, hands gripping the edge. Marple saw his knuckles whiten, legs stiffen. Slack came around the desk. Blackwood's eyes were wide. No words came. His chair slid back. He bent forward, coughed. Hard. Marple glanced at the glass on its side. Liquid pooled near the blotter. The smell was there, faint, bitter almonds. Blackwood's breathing slowed, then hitched. Slack held his arm, lowered him to the chair. Marple looked at the stove again. The last sheet burned through. Ash fell to the base. Blackwood tried to speak. Only air came out. Slack called his name once. No response. The room was silent, except for the lamp's faint buzz. Marple picked up the glass, brought it to her nose. The same poison sang in the glass, erased the page, erased the person. The registry office was quiet. One clerk behind the counter, head down. Slack set a folder on the desk. The clerk looked up, eyes uneasy. "We need marriage records," Slack said. The clerk nodded, turned to the cabinet. Keys rattled. Marple stood near the doorway, watched every movement. The clerk returned with a ledger, set it on the counter, opened to the W section. Slack leaned in, ran his finger down the page. Margaret Whitmore, entry present. Victoria Whitmore. Missing. He looked at the clerk. "Where is it?" The clerk's voice was low. "Should be here." Slack said nothing, turned the page back, then forward. No entry, no note. Marple stepped closer, pointed at the ink. "This is newer than the rest." The clerk swallowed. "Page replaced after water damage." Slack's voice was flat. "Which page?" The clerk avoided his eyes, didn't answer. Marple touched the edge, felt the difference. Paper smoother. Slack closed the ledger. "Show us the change log." The clerk hesitated, then reached under the counter, pulled out a small book. Slack flipped through it. Dates listed, some crossed out. One entry marked last week, initials unreadable. Marple leaned in. "Inkshade is off." Slack looked at the clerk. "Why?" The clerk's answer was quick. "Different pen." Marple didn't believe it. Her eyes shifted to the desk. A stack of papers sat there. On top, a typed memo. Slack picked it up, held it to the light. The letters were sharp, ribbon ink fresh. Still a faint chemical smell. He read the first line. "Regarding file adjustments." The clerk reached for it. Slack pulled it back, read further. "Access log attached. Names redacted in 2 places." Marple looked at the margins. No smudge, no dust. "Who typed this?" she asked. The clerk hesitated again. "I don't know." Slack set the memo on the counter, pointed at the type. "This isn't from your machine." The clerk didn't respond. Hands stayed on the desk. Marple's gaze stayed on the memo. Her mind moved over the lines. Halfway down the page, 3 words. Her eyes narrowed. Slack saw her expression change. "What?" She tapped the paper. "Here." This phrase, Slack read it aloud. "Fantasy life." Marple straightened. She had heard those words before. Breath loud, hinge louder. James sat in the corner, Blanket around his shoulders, wool itched against his neck. The room was small, one chair, one table. The kettle on the stove was cold. Slack had turned it off an hour ago. James rubbed his hands together, listened to the quiet. Outside. Gravel shifted, one step, then another. He froze, breathing shallow. The sound stopped, then started again, closer. The floor under him creaked when he moved. He stopped moving. A shadow passed the window, quick, then gone. James pulled the blanket tighter, felt his heartbeat in his throat. Footsteps circled the side of the house, slow, measured. The latch on the back door rattled once, then twice. James looked at the table, no weapon there. The front hinge gave a small groan, pressure on the wood. He stayed still. Every breath felt too loud. The sound moved along the wall, from front to side, a faint scrape on the siding, metal on wood. He stood now, back to the wall. The shadow returned to the window, paused there. James didn't blink, didn't move. The shadow shifted away, gravel underfoot again. He counted to 10. Didn't hear another step. Then, light pressure on the back door. Wood strained. The handle moved down, stopped. James took one step toward the door. Listened hard. A whisper of cloth against the frame. Someone close. The hinge made a small pop. Then, silence. James swallowed, his mouth dry. A breath came from the other side, slow, controlled. The latch shifted up. Metal tapped once, then the sound of steel, thin, sharp. A knife point touched the wood, scraped down. It moved toward the latch, slow, deliberate. James stepped back again, hands tight at his sides. The blade scratched the paint. Tiny flakes dropped to the floor. The noise was steady, 1 inch, then another. James stared at the door, didn't move. The scraping reached the latch, metal to metal, then stopped. Hands betray, words only follow. Margaret sat in the chair. Her nails were spotless, cut short, even. She rested her hands on the armrests. No movement, no fidget. Peyton stood near the desk, sleeve rolled back, a faint line of ink along the cuff. Slack leaned against the table, boots muddy at the edges, laces loose. Dr. Haydock closed his bag. The snap was loud in the quiet. Marple stood apart. Eyes moved from one to the other, slow. She watched the way Margaret's fingers stayed still, flat against the wood. Peyton shifted his weight, left foot forward, hands clasped behind his back. Slack took a step forward. Boot left a mark on the floor. Haydock adjusted the strap of his bag. The leather creaked. Marple said nothing. Her eyes moved again, each hand, each grip. Margaret smoothed the front of her dress, a precise motion. Peyton pulled a notebook from his pocket. The sleeve brushed the desk. Ink mark clearer now. Slack rubbed his boot against the floor. Mud smeared. Haydock checked. His watch. Closed the cover with a click. Marple kept her arms folded. She replayed each movement in her mind. The way Margaret avoided touching anything. The way Peyton's cuff had more ink than it should. The way Slack carried damp mud indoors. The way Haydock's bag stayed shut unless needed. Margaret cleared her throat. "Are we finished here?" No one answered. Peyton flipped the notebook open, scribbled something quick. Slack took a half step toward the door. Boot scraped again. Haydock set the bag on the chair, opened it just enough to check inside. Marple's eyes caught a loose thread on the table edge. Red. It clung to the wood. She reached out, picked it up, held it between finger and thumb, small, smooth. She turned toward Peyton. His sleeve was still rolled back. Marple's eyes dropped lower. To the cuff edge. A speck of red clung there, against the white. The thread matched the one in her hand. She stepped closer. Didn't speak. Peyton didn't notice. He was still writing. Marple's gaze stayed on the cuff. It should have been clean. It wasn't. lay bait, use truth. Slack set the folder on the desk, 2 wills inside, one real, 1 copied. Marple stood beside him, hands clasped. Peyton watched from the corner, eyes narrow. Slack opened the folder, placed each will flat, side by side. The duplicate looked identical, paperweight matched, the ink shade matched. Only one difference, stamp placement. The real one sat exactly right, the copy a fraction higher. Marple took out a sheet of carbon paper, pressed it over the copy. The impression was clear. Slack closed the folder, slid it into a marked envelope, red dot in the corner. Peyton asked, "And the real one?" Marple tapped another envelope, plain, no mark. Slack said, "Both stay here. Only one will move." The bell at the counter stayed silent. A small wire ran from it to Slack's pocket. A test, not an alarm. Marple checked the clock. The claim office appointment was in 2 hours. Slack rehearsed the placement. Envelope on the left of the desk, other papers on the right. Peyton frowned. "And if no one takes it?" Marple answered, "Then we wait longer." The room stayed quiet. Only the clock marked time. Slack stepped into the hallway, tested the wire to the bell. It didn't sound. Good. Marple shifted the marked envelope 1/2 inch, enough to tempt. Not enough to be obvious. Peyton crossed his arms, leaning back against the wall. The light in the room didn't change. Nothing moved. A full hour passed. No one came in. Then the latch turned, slow. Door opened just enough for a shadow to slip through. The figure wore gloves, dark, tight. They paused, looked around, saw the desk. No sound from the bell, no movement from Marple. The gloved hand hovered over the desk. Fingers flexed once. They reached toward the left side, stopped, moved to the right. Marple's eyes followed. No sound. The hand slid the marked envelope an inch closer. Then another. Slack stayed in the hallway, eyes on the gap in the door. The figure's head tilted. They opened the folder just enough to see the top page. The gloves gripped the paper, pulled it out. They didn't look twice. They didn't check the stamp. The hand moved toward the coat pocket, paper folding slightly. Marple's gaze didn't leave the stamp. It was the wrong will. The gloved hand reached for the wrong will. On camera. Motive begins at first knowledge. The board stood against the wall, pins in place, strings linking names to dates. Slack pointed at the top row. Clause discovered here, day 1 after death. Marple nodded. Her eyes moved along the string. Peyton stood back, hands behind his back. Slack tapped the next pin. Margaret knew second. Morning meeting, bank witness, present. Another string ran down to a third pin. Blackwood, same day, late afternoon. Marple stepped closer. And Victoria. Slack's finger landed on the 4th pin. She knew last, 2 days later. From the clerk, Peyton shifted. Which clerk? The one at the registry, Slack replied. Marple's eyes stayed on the pins. Footsteps? Slack reached for another sheet. Printed logs. Bank hallway, 4 sets recorded on the day after death. Marple read them. 2 matched known shoes. 2 did not. Peyton's brow furrowed. Could be staff. Slack shook his head. These match outside records. Claim office. Marple's eyes narrowed. Same person filed the claim and altered the log. Slack moved to the table, picked up the typed memo. Typewriter defect, he said. He pointed to the letter E, faint, on the top edge. Marple nodded slowly. Consistent throughout the memo. Slack placed another sheet beside it. Now, this letter from the bank. Same faint E. Petton leaned in. And that means... Slack's voice was flat. They came from the same machine. Marple looked at him. That machine isn't at the registry. No, Slack agreed. It's at a private desk. Peyton stepped back. Whose desk? Slack didn't answer yet. He opened another folder, pulled out a photograph. The image showed a small office, desk against the wall, typewriter on top. Marple studied the picture. Her eyes went to the nameplate. Peyton saw it too. His jaw tightened. Slack said, "This was taken yesterday." "The defect matches. The ribbon matches." Marple spoke quietly. "Then the person who typed the memo had direct access to the typewriter." Slack confirmed with a single nod. "And that typewriter belongs to someone who knew the clause before anyone else." Peyton's eyes moved between them. His hand adjusted his sleeve. Marple's gaze stayed fixed on the photograph. "This isn't the registry clerk's desk." Slack's voice was low. "It's someone closer." "The typist isn't the clerk. It's someone closer. Money stains. Reputation bleeds." Slack closed the door. The room held only four. Marple, Slack, Peyton, Margaret. On the table, 3 folders, each open, each marked. Marple pointed at the first. The erasures. Registry pages removed. Ink mismatched. Log entries altered. Her hand moved to the second folder. The forged will. 2 copies side by side. 1 clean, 1 copied. Victoria's name missing in the newer. Slack added, "Typed on your machine." Margaret's lips pressed tight. She said nothing. Marple tapped the 3rd folder. "The poison chain." Cups photographed. Residue reports. Matches in both cases. Victoria, Blackwood. Slack's pencil rested on the desk edge. He didn't write. Marple's voice stayed level. "The brandy switch." Photograph of the decanter. Glass beside it. Fingerprints on both. Slack continued. "The safe house leak." James's hiding place marked on a scrap of paper, found in a desk drawer, in Margaret's study. Margaret's eyes flicked to the paper, then away. Marple placed her gloves flat on the table. "Each act connects." Slack leaned forward. "In sequence, clause knowledge will change. Poison use. Claim filed." Peyton cleared his throat. "You're saying—" "I'm saying," Marple cut in. "It's all one plan." Margaret's chair didn't move. Her hands stayed on her lap. Slack listed the steps. 1. Remove Victoria's legal standing. 2. Secure sole beneficiary status. 3. Ensure no contest remains. Peyton's face paled. He looked at Margaret. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You have nothing that proves—" Marple interrupted. "Proof enough. Thread on your cuff from the red dress." Slack slid the evidence bag across. Small, clear. Margaret didn't touch it. Marple kept going. "Ledger entries leading to missing funds, all initialed by Blackwood, all after your meetings." Slack added, "And Blackwood dead means no testimony." Margaret's jaw tightened. Marple leaned back slightly. "You arranged his death exactly as you arranged hers. Different drink. Same result." Slack's voice was low. "And the leak to the safe house? Only one person had the address." Margaret's hands curled into fists. Still no words. Marple's tone did not change. "You planned 1 death," she said, "and caused 2. Some colors do not fade. The verdict was red. No movement in the room." Margaret sat still, hands clasped, face set. Peyton looked down, closed his folder. Slack stood by the door, said nothing. The judge's words ended. Gavel struck once, sharp. A quiet sob came from the back, one voice only. Then silence. Chairs shifted as people rose. Footsteps moved toward the aisle. Marple did not stand. Her eyes stayed on the table. On it, an evidence bag. Inside, a thin red ribbon. Slack came closer. "Yours now?" Marple shook her head. "Just for a moment." He placed it in her hand. The plastic cool. She opened the seal, slid the ribbon out. It lay across her palm, light, smooth. The color had not dulled, still sharp. She turned it over once. Edges frayed in 2 places. Paper was folded inside, small, tucked tight. She pulled it free, unfolded it slow, The paper was soft, ink dry, faded. Slack watched her read, said nothing. The words were brief, 4 lines, a name, a date. Marple folded it again, slipped it back into the ribbon. She closed her hand, felt the thread between her fingers. The church air was cooler now. Stone held the chill. Peyton passed by, gave a short nod. Slack stepped aside for him. The room emptied further. Only the clerk remained at the far desk, sorting papers. Marple stood, placed the ribbon back into the bag. Slack sealed it, marked the tag. They walked to the door together, stopped in the porch. Outside, the street was quiet. No one waiting. Slack looked at her. "You're certain?" Marple's answer was calm. Certain enough. They stepped out, gravel underfoot, light wind from the east. Slack held the door until it closed. The latch caught. Marple glanced once toward the church windows. The glass reflected nothing back. She reached into her pocket, felt the folded paper again. Not the same one. Another. She left it there, closed her hand around it. Slack waited, did not ask. They walked toward the gate. No more words between them. At the edge of the path, Marple stopped, looked down at the ribbon in the bag. Her voice was low. "Truth hurts," she whispered, "but it lets us breathe.